Good morning, everyone. Looks like we're live now. Warm greetings from New South Wales in Australia. It's 8 a.m. here on a summer's day, though we've got a fair bit of rain this morning. So just a quick sound and visual check. Those who are present, can you hear me and see me okay? Very good. Great. Thank you. Thanks for checking in. Someone asked what is the subject of the meditation this session. Usually, I know Jayasara sometimes brings a theme to her sessions, and although it's quite possible to do that, particularly if people have a request, I usually approach these sessions just with an open mind, not any particular theme in mind, except reflection on Dharma. And somehow, as we go through the guided meditation, and sometimes a theme emerges within that, and obviously your questions at the end will bring forth the Dharma in response to what you're interested in today. So people tuning in from different places in Europe, Switzerland and Poland, Belgium, and obviously the US. There's someone from Portugal, Canada, someone from Adelaide in Australia, Scottish borders and Jersey, Ohio, Seattle, Candelo. So it's great to see people from all over the world tuning in. Cambridge, Ireland, Arizona, the UK, Texas, Munich, Slovenia, Narnia. Fantastic. France. That's really nice to know that there's this connection, this web of connection all over the world as we do our meditation and reflect on Dharma. So let's get ready for the meditation. I like to encourage people to just don't set up in your mind that you're going to do something really special now and that everything has to change. I like a very natural approach to meditation, because ultimately we want to develop the skills of mindfulness that benefit us and stay with us, and that we can develop throughout all our waking hours, whether sitting, standing, walking, lying down, whether we're working or in conversation or resting or doing meditation. This continuity of mindfulness is what's important and is what helps us integrate the Dharma and our understanding more fully into our lives. So as we're approaching the formal meditation, you're obviously in a seated position, or perhaps you're lying down if you've got some pain. Best not to lie down if there's no reason to, only because it's easier to fall asleep as you relax. But many people develop the lying down posture because of particular pain, the hips or the back, or some illness. So it's actually quite good to develop mindfulness in the lying down posture. So as we not always just associating lying down with sleep. So wherever you find yourself, just bring your awareness to the body, even with your eyes open at this stage. Just lower them a little bit. Or some might still prefer to look at me on the screen at this stage, but bringing your awareness to the body, become aware of the particular posture you're in. And by that I mean just feel the sensations of your body as you're sitting there or lying there. And there's various sensations going on. So you can just do a quick, it doesn't have to be so quick, just a scan through from the top of your head, bringing awareness to the sensations around the skull, the head, around the face. The face can hold a lot of sensation because this is the center of, our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the speech organ. So these are activated quite a lot. So there's a lot of nerve endings, nerve paths there. The face is the place where we express so much. So just be aware of the sensations all around the face. And as you do that, just particularly being aware of the jaw, relaxing your jaw, relaxing your neck, stretching your spine at the back of the neck. And being aware of your shoulders, particularly if you're holding any tension there. Roll your shoulders back just lightly and relax. Become aware of the sensations down your back, down the spine. The sensations in the front of the torso, around your stomach, the digestive system internally, chest. And of course, the weight of the body sitting, you can feel that around the pelvis and the buttocks, where you feel the force of gravity pushing the body to the chair or the couch, whatever you're sitting on. The sensations of contact, weight. And then just becoming aware of the sensations down your legs to the feet. And then taking in the body as a whole. Now we're much more aware of the body through giving attention to these sensations that are present. And as we do that, as we maintain some awareness around the body sensations, we naturally become aware of the movement of the in and out breath. So this is a great approach and natural settling in to the meditation. As you become aware of the breath through the sensations of the breath path from breathing in through the nostrils, you feel the breath expanding your chest, your lungs. And on the out breath, the deflation of the lungs, the chest, the feeling of the breath being expelled back through the nostrils. And this natural rhythm of the body breathing. You can bring your awareness to just notice this natural rhythm. We don't want to try and control the breath in any way or force the breath to be one way or another. in this kind of meditation, we're just going to notice through recognizing, becoming aware of the sensations of the breath moving in and out of the body. So just spend a few minutes to start to notice this, the movement of the breath, recognizing the sensations as the body breathes in and breathes out. At this stage, you can close your eyes if you prefer, or perhaps just keep them open while you're establishing this mindfulness of the breath, mindfulness of breathing. So we're observing a flow of sensations. The breath is a process that can be known in the present through the sensations, the relative feeling of the warmth and cool of the breath as it enters and leaves the body. The sensations from the sensitivity inside the nostrils as the air moves past. The sensations internally of the air traveling through the windpipe and expanding our lungs. The expansion of our chest, we feel the sensation of our clothing move against our skin with the expansion and deflation of the whole upper torso. And then as the breath is expelled, feeling the warmth of the air being expelled through the nostrils. So just observe this as you would observe little waves rippling in on the shore of a beach or a lake. Just a slight rippling of the tide coming in, going out. Just observing that movement. But this is felt, sensed internally. So observing those sensations. Not at a big distance, but as they're happening, a bit aware. So naturally, there will be thoughts also coming and going within your mental awareness, your mind stream, if you like. You may be hearing sounds now and then in your environment and experiencing other sensations of the body, not necessarily connected with the breath. So it's okay for those things to be present, to come and go as they do. But in this practice of mindfulness, of breathing, what we're doing is developing a skill that can recognize and utilize the sensations of the breath as a centering device. Because our awareness of the breath, when we become aware of the breath, it's always in the present moment. So by developing a continuity of such awareness, we're developing a continuity of mindfulness in the present, connected to the body, the experience of body and breath. And because the breath is a natural function, we don't have to make it happen. We can rest that the quality of the will that is often pushing attention this way and that. Although just have this gentle intention to be aware of the breath, to be aware of the breath. And every time where we find ourselves traveling with a string of thoughts, thinking about the past or the future or lost in daydreams, we simply remember the breath. It's a waking up process out of those mental habits. Waking up, bringing awareness to the present moment, connecting with the breath sensation as an anchor or as a centering device to here and now. Letting go of the habit of wanting to think about the past or the future, worrying about the past or the future. Learning how to connect with and relax in the present moment and let each moment unfold with awareness. This is what we're doing with the mindfulness of breathing. And it's quite natural that there may be a fair amount of restlessness initially in the body, the mind. So we recognize that and don't make a problem of it. Don't try to force the mind to be still. Just notice how this is the feeling or the sensations of restlessness. It's like some wind is blowing up on the sea where you're observing the waves coming and going. It's disturbing the surface of the water. But we can just notice that as it is. Relax with that as it is. You don't have to try to change it. But the more we can have awareness of each moment of the breath, relaxed attention, relaxed awareness, things settle down all by themselves. So we have to just be a little bit patient to get past, to get beyond this restlessness in the mind or the body. So don't react. Don't identify with it or take it personally. Just see it as it is and continue to be aware of the breath as you feel it. And keeping an open mind, an open kind of awareness. If you find you're feeling a bit strained or tight, and try to relax the effort a little. The breath will come and go by itself. Your awareness can actually be quite broad whilst being aware of this breath sensation coming and going. It doesn't have to be really focused and really tight, trying to hang on to something. We can never hang on to the breath or any object. We can just notice it as the sensations come and go, which indicate the in and out breath. So we're observing just a series of sensations that ripple through the mind, helping us to keep a sense of center and balance and connectedness to this present moment. And the breath itself, as the body and mind settles, it's a very calming object to observe because it begins to settle, get more and more fine, so it can lead your attention into finer states of awareness. And just let any thoughts that come just float through the space of awareness, just as a bird flies through the sky. We don't try to block it, just let it move through. Some thoughts might grab our attention, and as soon as we recognize that, we open the mind, release the grasping or the identification with that thought. It simply moves through, disappears, disperses. And we center ourselves again by connecting with the breath. And sometimes we have to recognize the emotions. Sometimes it's the more subtle emotions that can distract us. Just like the feeling of, I'm a bit bored with watching the breath. It's not very interesting. And so the mind feeling some boredom actually seeks to attach to thought or to think of something interesting. So if we can recognize first the feeling of boredom or disinterest in the breath or desire to have something more entertaining to look at or to think about, just notice that. That's interesting in itself. Boredom and restlessness are mind states. And if we know them as they are, we're free of them. If we don't know them as they are, they entrap us. They lead us around like a cowherd leads a cow on a rope. So meditation is about developing awareness and mastery of the mind through understanding, through knowledge, getting to know it in all its manifestations. Boredom, restlessness, doubt or indecision, irresolution, desire, aversion, happiness, sadness, excitement, despair, all of these different moods of the mind, different emotional flavors, we get to know, to observe, and to understand just for what it is. They're really rather fleeting patterns of mind that become more persistent when we're identified with them and don't really see them and understand them. So they tend to control us. Knowing and seeing and understanding these things, we can understand how to be free of them, to release them, release ourselves, release them, release the mind, whichever way you want to talk about it. They're really just fleeting states, habitual patterns. They don't, even if they arise, they don't have to inhibit the mind if we come to understand how to free them or free the mind or let them be, let them go. They free themselves. They're just patterned shapes, patterned views or mental constructs. Coming back to observe or be connected with the breath. Allows the letting go of these things. And the breath will also indicate any emotional content that we may be affected by in any given moment. So the breath is also a mirror of the mind in that sense. Learning how to relax with the breath. It can relax the whole body. Can start to undo any knots of tension, held tension in the body, and also in the mind. This body-mind connection. Being aware of the whole breath path. Means also becoming aware of the spaces between the in-breath and the out-breath. At the end of the in-breath, there's a small space before the out-breath begins. And at the end of the out-breath, particularly as the body, mind relaxes more and more, there can often be a long space before the next in-breath. So also recognizing this experience of space, of the lack of breath sensation in between the flow of breath sensation. So recognizing the element of space is distinct from the other elements, the other four elements of sensation, contact, can take the mind to a deeper level of refinement and relaxation and a sense of expansion, spaciousness. Resting in spaciousness. Even as we remain connected to body and breath, we can feel and recognize space and spaciousness. And if the mind becomes more stable in this awareness and recognition, you can also become aware of the quality of knowing itself or awareness itself. Which also has this quality of spaciousness, expansiveness. Perhaps it's more pervasive, the word pervasive, rather than expansive. So all these elements we can recognize, come to know and understand within our practice. So for now, let's bring our awareness more strongly back to the sensations of the breath and the body. And as we end this meditation, wherever you find yourself, internally. Just recognize, even if just a little bit, this quality of peace, of settledness, calmness that emerges from just being willing to be present with things as they are, and cultivating this awareness of breath as a means, as a skill to help us center, be mindful, to stabilize awareness in the present, and to recognize the qualities of mind and body, to recognize our experience from the perspective of awareness. So coming back into, or fully into your body, into your space, and in your own time opening your eyes and coming back into the space, this shared space of the screen. And we have an opportunity to ask any questions in the chat box if you have any questions about meditation or Dharma practice in general. I'm very happy to respond to those. Or if you have any, even, or just want to share some comments about your experience. And just while giving people a chance to type in some questions, I'll just say a few more words about mindfulness of breathing. This is a method, one of the main meditation methods taught by the Buddha. And it is a method that's very accessible for everyone, even if it feels difficult at first. We're breathing all the time, the body's breathing all the time, so the breath is always there as something we can connect with to help to cultivate this presence of mind. The mindfulness of breathing, the Buddha taught, can actually take us all the way to full liberation, full understanding, full wisdom, or at least the wisdom of knowing the way out of suffering, of releasing the mind from suffering. Liberated beings, according to the Pali Suttas, they have different scopes of wisdom. Some may be very wise, and some might have more limited wisdom, even though they may be liberated from suffering. So the degree of wisdom or the degree of skill in deep concentrated states varies. But if one has this key insight into understanding how suffering is created and how it can be let go of, how it can be abandoned in the mind, this is actually the liberating insight in the Pali Suttas that the Buddha taught. Okay, any questions coming up for people? I hope that guidance was helpful. There's obviously different ways we can talk about mindfulness of breathing, but since we have great resources online, if you want to read the original teaching of the Buddha on mindfulness of breathing, it's in what's called the Majjhima Nikaya. And I think it's the sutta is number 118. So if you want to look that up and read for yourself, just type into Google search MN118. And if it's called the Anapanasati Sutta, then that's the one I'm talking about. And you can see there the progression that the Buddha is encouraging. It takes a while to develop the skill of such a progression, but all of those elements are within just observing the breath. Someone says, is the clinger and awareness the same? The one who clings and awareness, no, they're not the same. Clinging, or the experience of clinging, is really just a habitual pattern of mind. Yeah, there is no one who is clinging per se, even though our language, when we talk, our language is actually kind of built around and built within language is this subject-object divide. So we get the sense that there's someone doing something. But ultimately, it's just habitual patterns of mind. So the clinging is within the sense of when we have a sense of being someone identified with something. Like, instead of seeing an angry thought as an angry thought that arises and ceases, we become angry and feel ourselves as an angry person, and I am angry, and we think ourselves as an angry person, and maybe we think of ourselves as I'm a person who has a problem with anger. We start to conceptualize all of this, rather the non-clinging, and that's clinging. If we're really identified with that, we're stuck in this subject-object divide with this idea of I am a someone with a something, a problem. And this can perpetuate to a large degree. And I'm not saying there's no, I mean, we're all operating within these conceptual constructs. And sometimes we have to break that down. If you recognize, you're getting angry all the time, we may need to seek some therapeutic support to unpack what's going on there. So it's not as if you don't try to help yourself out of this. But ultimately, the clinging is just that. It's a pattern of mind that keeps getting reconstructed with certain sensory input. And if we're identified with it, then naturally we suffer. We have this experience of suffering within it as contracted, painful states. So the meditation and the insights that emerge out of meditation is learning to recognize that these states, whether painful or pleasant, are actually impermanent, and they are constructed. And once we see how they're constructed, once the mind, let's say, there's more clarity, more understanding of recognizing how these things arise and are put together and how they perpetuate or how they can disband, this is where the element of wisdom arises, and the intuitive understanding of non-clinging. Just why would we deliberately put our hands in a fire that burns? Once we understand the action of doing that burns, we tend to hands off. So that's wisdom. And with the hands off, we recognize things change, and the mind is naturally released from those states. The more this understanding and skill is developed or matures, it doesn't pick up suffering states, therefore it doesn't perpetuate it, doesn't get ingrained, so these states fall apart by themselves. So I hope that helps somewhat. So the awareness is the natural state, the natural condition of the mind, let's say, that allows wisdom to arise. If we learn to rest in awareness, this clarity emerges, which naturally understands the way things work with mindfulness and wisdom. And so that's the brief explanation. Do I need to find a teacher to learn Buddha teachings, or can I learn on my own? Well, it goes both ways. We can learn a lot on our own. There's so many teachings available these days online or in texts, with books. There's a lot we can learn on our own, and a lot of teachers are teaching online. Sometimes there's something we can't quite see, we can get stuck and we can't quite understand what's going on, or so then it can be helpful to have a teacher to help guide through certain places that we can't see for ourselves what's going on. Yeah, so that's always helpful. But as I say, these days are unprecedented in terms of what's available online, the depth of the learning. The only thing we have to be aware of is, because so much is available, it can just become conceptual knowledge. The thing with the Buddhist path is that we really have to develop this mindfulness in order for true insight and understanding to emerge. So mindfulness is both this calm and clarity that comes from resting mind in the present moment. And these days, it's not just us, it's throughout history. We're distracted by mental states. We're identified with certain mental states that often keep us from resting the mind in the present in order to allow this calm and clarity to emerge that sees things as they are. So we really have to practice the teachings, as sometimes what's called the three prongs of the Dharma is we learn it first through hearing teachings or reading teachings. So we get a conceptual knowledge, and then we also have to put that into practice. Like, actually, what does that mean in terms of cultivating a wholesome action of body, speech, and mind, of cultivating mindfulness, some calm and clarity, and cultivating wisdom, which is like contemplating certain aspects of our experience in a way that elicits insight. One of those key things is to recognize just the impermanent nature, or the changing nature, the transient nature, or the process nature of everything that we can experience. Just to recognize that characteristic of our experience is a portal for insight. So we study, we learn, we practice, and then the realization or the insights that come through really is what that clarifies the view, clarifies the path. Because with conceptual knowledge, we can still be, even though it can be moving us in the right direction, we still don't necessarily have the insight of the Four Noble Truths, of how suffering is really arising here and now, how we're trapped by it, and how we can experience release from that, how the mind can be released from that. But this comes through insight, so that's when the path really clarifies, when you really understand the truth that these ideas, these concepts, these paradigms are pointing to. So often a combination of one's own learning and practicing with a teacher can be helpful. There are many different kinds of Buddhist practice as well. It's developed in so many different ways over the centuries in different geographical regions, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, and different practices within these traditions based on different methods and different teachers' understandings. So sometimes it can feel like a little bit of a maya when you go looking for a teaching or a tradition. But we have to start somewhere, so finding what resonates with you is helpful. So make sense for you initially. Someone asked, can we be assured that liberation is within us, even though tremendous mental suffering, even through tremendous mental suffering, that is very, very active throughout an entire lifetime? So can we be assured that liberation is within us, even though we can be experiencing a lot of suffering? Well, the suffering itself is obviously a sign that there's grasping, there's patterns of concept and mental activity that are identified with certain experience, mental experience. Identified meaning thinking, I am this, or this is me, and then we have this aversion or desire coming up. I really, if it's a painful experience, obviously we don't want it, but we get into a struggle with these things. And then even as we're suffering, it can be hard to have faith that liberation is possible. In some traditions, in the higher paths of the Vajrayana tradition, they talk about the fact that actually awareness is already free. And when you recognize this, even if it's only a glimpse, you understand what that means. So even if suffering arises, something in you has glimpsed previously that this isn't the whole story. Even as you might find that you're really stuck on some suffering state or suffering concept, there may be something in you that says, I know this isn't the whole story, but I can't find my way out of this right now. So that's what we call faith or confidence, even in its early stages, because you've seen something that says, I know that this isn't the whole story. And so you cultivate this quality of awareness that can be mindful of what's happening here and now, to observe how mind is clinging to thoughts of I am this, or this is me, or I have a real problem, or I have to get rid of this in order to get something else. Or observing just contracted states of mind around the experience of grief or fear, contracted states of mind and body around trauma, fear, hurt. We have to find ways to, even with therapeutic help or within our own practice, to breathe into those experiences and allow them to unfold, to open, in order to release and recognize that awareness is already free. Even though there has been this experience of being trapped, once that's released, you recognize it was a conditioned state, and a state that was being fueled by some false notion of this is me or mine, or this is, in the absolute sense, a problem. Yeah, it's hard to describe, but I think you might know what I mean. Once the mind is no longer so identified or so clinging to that, these states start to disperse and fall apart. So you see the conditioned nature of these states and of the interactivity of mind and body, of memory, of clinging, of desire, aversion. You see all these states, mind states, involved in this process of what we call suffering. So, confidence is something that arises even from a small glimmer of insight, but it can also be intuitive. Sometimes a teacher might say something to you that gives you hope or faith that, this really is possible, even though this suffering might come back. Try to notice if you experience habitual forms of suffering, how that comes into being, that it's not necessarily traveling with you 24/7. It's the mind turning to remember certain things or reconstructing scenarios in the present. And sometimes we need a lot of help, if we've had trauma or a lot of pain in our lives, and skillful therapeutic help, just to begin to unfold those experiences and step back a little bit and see them in a new light, or see around them a little bit. Essentially, this is what our own practice of mindfulness and awareness will also do. Just help bring some perspective. But if we are in getting caught in very habitual states, sometimes sitting down to meditate, we might end up just ruminating about this stuff, which can often feel like it's adding more fuel to the fire. So we have to keep expanding out to see with awareness, to connect with the body and the breath, to breathe through some of this material and to let it go. What is it to let go? See the past as the past. The future is the unknown. And learning how to find a refuge in present moment awareness. So I hope that's helpful a little bit. And David asks, when on retreat, if we reach a state of vipassana or insight, how can we best utilize this? Well, the wisdom mind knows itself. We don't have to utilize it in any way necessarily. Insight arises when you see the way things are really working, or sometimes it just arises intuitively because the mind has settled into a state of calm and clarity. You might not understand how this has arisen, but some new understanding has arisen. And just that perspective allows you to see things in a clearer way, and often allows you to be open and relaxed and letting go of things you would otherwise perhaps hang on to, or the mind would otherwise just be habitually stuck to and travel with. So it allows a broadening of a more spaciousness, a broadening of awareness. And true wisdom is non-conceptual, so it will inform your life even if you're not conceptualizing what it means, and will inform the direction of your life and path even if you're not conceptualizing it. But it may be a particular realization or insight, say, into the quality or characteristic of impermanence of all conditioned things, impermanence, or the transient nature of a bodily manifestation, a transient nature of thoughts, or seeing how the past is just a memory, a thought moment, a memory arising in the present, or that our idea of the future is similarly just a thought based on memory arising in the present. So when we see this clearly, we can sometimes then utilize that understanding at different times in our lives. Say if we we've had an insight into the fact that really the future, the idea of a future is just a thought arising in the present, projecting into this idea of future. And it might be habitual worry or anxiety from some past experience, bringing it into the present and then thinking, oh, I need to avoid that in the future. Or, just a subtle sense of anxiety. I hope that doesn't happen kind of thing. So to recognize that, once you've had insight into it, you can recognize it more when it is emerging. Like, oh, I recognize that feeling of anxiety. It's very habitual. You can either just, not recognize it and it stays gurgling there in the background, informing your actions and behavior, or you can recognize it in full awareness. Say, oh, there's that anxiety. That's just a habitual anxiety about, maybe catastrophizing a future scenario. Okay, that's just what that is. And once you see it clearly, you can let it go. Free your mind from that influence in that moment. So this is the power of awareness and insight. So we can utilize those insights, particularly the insights around anicca, dukkha, and anatta, or that is the transient, changeable nature of all conditioned things. The fact that if there's the experience of suffering or unsatisfactoriness in the present, there's usually grasping, identification underlying that. So if there's grasping or identifying with anything, it will create this sense of contractedness or dukkha. And the anatta, the not-self nature of all conditioned experiences or all phenomena, means that these things, once you see them as transient, they disappear in that moment and you recognize it's not who and what I am. Having been identified, I thought, this is me. Once they've disappeared or shown themselves in their true nature, you recognize it's not a self, it's a transient phenomena, transient conditioned phenomena, maybe extremely habitual, but it's not self. So these insights we can, having had some degree of insight into these characteristics of conditioned existence or phenomena, we can utilize and we can exercise that understanding in different aspects of our lives or in meditation. Not to make it conceptual, but sometimes we have to remember that conceptual understanding in order then to lead an investigation into the present moment in terms of what's here and now, what's arising here and now. Yeah, okay. So, thank you for the meditation. Could you say a few words on the difference between losing mind-body awareness in presence versus being so immersed in a task that you're not aware of mind-body? Well, I think in many ways we can say that's similar. Losing mind-body awareness in presence, I'd say in presence you can lose or move beyond the sense of body awareness. Like you can actually be fully present, but without a sense of the body, like that mind has become so refined that it's not picking up on the coarser perceptions of body. But there's still awareness of what is present, and often it can be a perception of space or awareness itself, or equanimity, awareness that this remains present. So perception of body may no longer be apparent, but awareness itself is still very apparent. So you haven't lost in the sense of the mind there. If we're talking about mind as mental movement, similarly, the mental movement can, awareness can be so stable, let's say, and still that mental movement can be in alliance, yet there's still full presence, full awareness. And there may be, minor mental movements recognized, but still full presence. So, and you're asking, is there any difference, or to speak about any difference between losing or being so immersed in a task that you're not aware of body mind? So this is quite similar. So if you're really immersed in, so if you're a wood turner and you're really immersed in turning that wood or creating a piece of art, really this is what we can talk about. The mind is concentrated or very focused on a task. So there would be, if it's a physical task to some degree, there's some aspect of awareness of the physicality that's required to perform that task, wood turning or painting or playing an instrument. So there would be just that amount required for that, and the mind is so focused, it's really almost merged with that, unified. And this is a kind of samadhi, when we call unification of mind. And it's so focused, there's no other distracting elements coming in because there's such a degree of focus and involvement in that. So this can be quite a blissful state in itself, and people can experience what they call the flow states, quite blissful, undistracted, focused states, and a sense of unification of mind or non-distraction, non-fragmentation. So this is a kind of samadhi. So it's quite similar in the meditation. We can call that, what I was earlier talking about within the meditation, a samadhi as well, when elements of bodily perception are no longer appearing, and certain elements of mental movement are no longer appearing. It's just pure presence. So it has a particular focus, even though that focus might be just awareness itself, or the quality of space, or even just resting in equanimity or pure mindfulness. The difference, I would say, is with the meditation, it's very focused in the sense of you're using this very body mind itself as the arena of investigation. And even though that's the same for being fully immersed in a task, you don't tend to have that awareness that you're exploring this body mind for the sake of understanding the nature of reality. So perhaps the view is a little bit different, or even though we may experience similar states, sometimes when you emerge out of that task, you may feel good, but you may not have the wisdom element arising regarding the nature of mind and body in and of itself. But if nevertheless you're interested in that, in the nature of reality, sometimes these insights can emerge out of those states, whether you're looking for it or not. It depends a little bit on how ripe the wisdom factor is, for want of a better term, within that being's mind stream. Sometimes insights can just bubble up, and then that wisdom will tend to lead that person on in their life in terms of how they live their life and how they continue to learn about the nature of being within their life. So I hope that brings some clarity to your question. So someone asks how to keep from falling asleep while meditating. So in one respect, if one falls asleep or begins to fall asleep, it's a sign that the body's and mind is relaxing a little bit, which is great. But what we want to develop in meditation is to notice when we're getting that relaxation happening, but to bring a little more clarity in, or a little more energy in, so we're not just habitually moving into sleep. If we're beginning a practice of meditation, sometimes this is what happens, because usually, the body mind is conditioned to, if we're not engaged in any tasks, if we're being still, this is a signal for the body mind to go to sleep. So that's just habitual kind of thing that's developed. So now we want to introduce the intention. We want some lucid awareness, and that's what we're using. So the object, we're using the breath sensation as an object of awareness to help create a bit more clarity. So every time you feel this, recognize a sense of tiredness or drifting. Sometimes you feel your body starting to move or nod, or just this sense of cloudiness internally, just wanting to settle into the cotton wool of the sleep state. See if you can bring a bit more awareness to actually feel the sensations of the breath at the nostrils or the chest or the stomach or in your body. Take an extra deep breath, so oxygenate your system a little more. And establish that intention to be really aware. I want to be aware. There's the real balance in meditation is this state of relaxation yet lucidity. So it's not wrong that the body mind is relaxing, and sometimes if we're very tired, the body will just want to fall asleep anyway. So sometimes you have to have a good rest. Let the body sleep before you can come back to practice this balance of finding relaxation with lucidity. So just bringing a little more energy in, whether that's through directing awareness to sensations, and really that energy to track sensations, to really watch something. The desire to know brings more energy in. Oxygenating, some 3 deep, deliberate in and out breaths where you're really tracking with your awareness the breath sensations. Sometimes changing your posture and just massaging the earlobes. There's apparently some nerve endings there that can stimulate. Splashing water on your face if you want to change position and come back to meditation. So these are a couple of hints, a couple of tips. Generally speaking, just bringing more energy in some way. Yeah. Sometimes getting up from sitting and just doing standing meditation for 5 minutes can bring that energy in a good way. I've practiced with the Western Insight tradition, a forgiveness practice with phrases. I find it helpful. Does the Forest tradition have a similar practice, and what would be the sutta it is based on? A forgiveness practice. I don't recall any particular sutta advice for forgiveness practice with phrases. But the main sutta from the Pali tradition is the Metta Sutta, the Discourse on Loving Kindness, where the Buddha encouraged his disciples to really develop this quality of loving kindness, of love for all beings. Just as a mother protects with her life her only child, so with a boundless heart one should generate this loving kindness towards all beings, beings that you like or dislike or are afraid of, or who you feel comfortable with, everyone impartially. So this was an encouragement, and it's also connected to what we call the four Brahma Viharas, or the four divine abiding states of divine abiding, which is loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. So the Buddha encouraged the development of these states of mind because of their expansive quality, and they can lead to deeply concentrated states, but they're also very wholesome intentions of mind that, when developed, within the kindness and compassion, then forgiveness is a natural happening, something that unfolds very naturally within the practice of kindness and compassion. Because the opposite of forgiveness is like resentment, isn't it? Or it's resentment towards others, or resentment towards ourselves that might manifest in some kind of chronic sense of guilt or self-hatred. So we have to, develop this quality of kindness and compassion, both internally and externally, or for self and others. And forgiveness unfolds from that. There's no, in the light of kindness and compassion, any resentment or aversion or self-hatred just melts or unfolds. So one of the ways in some of the sutras this is talked about is developing a mind of loving kindness or compassion, sympathetic joy, equanimity, and generating it in all directions, above, below, in front of us, behind, to all around, north, south, east, west, and to all beings impartially. So we can actually develop that. Jayasara released a video with a prayer. I'm not sure, it might have been a prayer from the Christian tradition, which does something similar. May there be love in front of me, love behind me, love above me, below me, all around, within, without. So just developing, you can start with a phrase internally just to bring that quality to mind, or an intention: may I be well, may others be well, may I be free from anxiety, may others be free from anxiety. And if it's a particular person that you want to practice forgiveness towards, you can look at that whole construct, because it's not just the other, it's also oneself, that there's a hanging on to something within, which is probably the memory or the concept of what that person did that you can't forgive, perhaps, or some hurt. So that has to be brought to mind as well, or recognized, and then sending loving kindness towards that, which is simply, one way of doing that is saying, can I breathe with this feeling of hurt, with this memory and all its the emotional states it gives rise to. Can I breathe with that? And just learn to relax, to actually breathe with that, soften around the resistance. This is the beginning of metta, acceptance of breathing with, and then embracing those feelings, and to the feeling of actually sending love to them, being kind towards oneself, and then bringing in the sense of the other who may have had some involvement in this construct, in this happening in this event, this relationship, and embracing the perception of that other being as well. Can I breathe fully with the perception of that other being, that memory? Can I extend or direct love and kindness to this being who will no doubt also be experiencing some contracted states of aversion or hatred or self-hatred or pain in some form? Just as I experience that, so do they and all other beings experience that. So we recognize anything that I can experience emotionally is also the same as what other beings can and do experience. So by learning how to bring kindness internally, we can spread it externally. Or similarly, by first learning how to spread it externally, we can then also include ourselves. So this is an exploration, and it starts with an idea and intention, and that intention gets encapsulated in a phrase to help you stay with that process. But then it becomes a very felt, it comes into the felt sense of things. Yeah, so any of the suttas based on the practice of loving kindness or metta, or the four Brahma Viharas, you could look that up in a Google search, Brahma Vihara, and you might find different sutta references. How do we cope when desires bubble up that frustrate the body? How do we escape being trapped by that kind of energy that wills us to do certain things we feel may not benefit us spiritually? Well, the body-mind is very connected. So you say when desires bubble up that frustrate the body, I would just say, desire can bubble up in any way, whether it be towards desire manifests in different ways. It can be towards sense experience, usually based on a memory of something we've experienced as pleasant. Desire will bubble up to say, I want that again. Search the environment. Can I get that again? So it's based on memory. So you can see, with enough awareness, you can see that thought arising, and it activates a body memory such that it can activate memory around a pleasant experience and activate what we call desire, which is almost like can be felt in the body and the mind as this kind of longing. And it's interpreted as we feel we lack something, and until we can get that, whatever the mind has decided is latched onto, that we feel we can't be free of this longing or sense of lack. But actually, it's a delusion. It's split the world into subject-object there. So if you actually see the thought and the desire itself arise, although it activates certain energy of desire and memory in the body, that can be allayed by recognizing that it's connected to this thought. So if that thought is continued, entertained, then it will continue to give rise to that desire. But once you realize it's connected to this thought, you can turn your mind to think otherwise. Go somewhere else, put your mind on something else. Particularly if you recognize, if I follow that thought or desire, it's actually not going to be beneficial. So this is actually one of the main skillful means we can use, by recognizing it's not going to lead me anywhere beneficial. There may be some short-term gratification, but I know beyond that, I'm not going to feel any better, and oftentimes I feel worse. So that you really got to bring that wisdom to mind. And then use some degree of willpower, if you have to just turn your mind to a different thought. This is like thought replacement. You've got to stop thinking that, because you're just stimulating the energy, the chemical process of desire, a bit like the addict, I guess. Sometimes we need extra support if there is an addictive behavioral pattern to actually break that pattern. But essentially, recognizing that it will only ultimately bring more suffering, despite maybe some short-term gratification if it's not beneficial. And if you want to change that habit, finding ways to recognize it, that it's actually the thought that's creating the desire. And if you see the thought as fleeting, as impermanent, as conditioned, and it's stimulating a conditioned pattern of energy, you can explore different ways to shift that. You put your mind in something wholesome, go and do something else. Explore what that is. You might need to go and do something physically, work in the garden, or dig a hole in the ground, or go for a run or a walk in nature. You may have to do something physically to change that flush of chemical reactivity in the body, but you can. Or you might find something that's more beneficial. So if one's addicted to a certain kind of food that you know isn't good for you, you may replace that with a healthier food. So at least you're satisfying the sense of hunger, even though it might not be the desire for something like really sweet and sugary that you know isn't good for you and makes you feel physically bad afterwards with a crash. So you can find something to replace that, or if it's a habit you're trying to break, find something wholesome that can help satisfy what the body requires without it having an unfortunate effect. But ultimately, the insight is that these are just thoughts and memories, and when we see them as such and we see them as fleeting, we can drop them. But a big part of that is recognizing what you are indicating here, that if I follow a certain kind of behavior that won't benefit us spiritually, we've got to recognize that as well in order to break the habit. It can help us break that habit. So I hope that's given you a few ways to think about and work with this. Sometimes when I'm in a good state of concentration, there's a small point appearing, but when I observe it, it disappears. I already try to find more details about that point, but I couldn't find it. So I'm not sure what you mean by a point, whether you mean visually within there's a point of light or something appearing, or some manifestation of something. It doesn't really matter what it is, as you've noticed. When I try to observe it, it disappears. So simply just notice that, because things, in some way, they're all appearances. And some teachers, particularly Dzogchen teachers, will talk about the fact that they're not actually really there. Things are like a magical illusion or a apparition. Sometimes they appear to be there, but as soon as you go to look for it, it disappears. And that can be said also for any aspect of our experience, physically and mentally. So this is a fascinating place of investigation in our practice. So when you say you look for something, it disappears, that's fine. Just know that. Just know that that's its nature. So you don't have to go and find it elsewhere or start thinking about it, but just be present with what is, because in the disappearance of that, you call it a point, whether it's of light or some kind of manifestation or some kind of movement in the mind, it disappears, but what remains? there is this spaciousness, this quality of spaciousness and awareness. So we learn to recognize that these are non-appearing experiences that nevertheless can be recognized and rested in, and allow the meditation just to develop naturally. It goes where it will. But our job is to just recognize what's happening. And if we recognize something is impermanent, it disappears, we just simply see that. And in terms of what remains, we remain present with that. This is the process. Things will unfold in and of themselves. So you also say, is that point my imagination, or does it really exist? Both, to some degree, it's the imagination. Does it really exist or not exist? It exists in its appearance, and when it disappears, it shows it's not a permanent, fixed something, which is the nature of everything that you can observe. So that's a good insight, and it's a good inquiry. How can you, so the Buddha says, if we see with wisdom the arising of things, phenomena, things, we cannot say they don't exist, because we see with wisdom they're arising, they've arisen. But if we see with wisdom the cessation of things, the disappearance of things, we cannot say they exist, because we've seen that they disappear. They don't really exist in a permanent, fixed way. Yet there is this appearance and disappearance. So really the nature of reality is within all of that. So the Buddha goes on, if we see with wisdom the arising of things, we cannot take the view or position that they don't exist. But if we see with wisdom the cessation or the disappearance of things, we cannot say that they exist. So we can't take that view either. Most people conceptually are looking, as you are in your question, does it exist or doesn't exist? Or doesn't it exist? Is it or isn't it? The Buddha's pointing out the fact that we can't take either position, because there's appearances, but those appearances dissolve. So where we left, the Buddha says, then I teach, by the way, the middle. And he goes through what's called dependent arising, paticca samuppada, with ignorance as condition, with not knowing the true nature of reality. That's what ignorance is. Then sankharas, mental formations, arise. With mental formations, sense consciousness. So we get this whole flow of phenomenal experience that if we don't understand the nature of the mind and of reality, we can believe this flow of phenomenal experience is truly existing, that is solid and real, me, mine, But actually, the Buddha said it's just conditionally arisen, because if we look with wisdom, this flow that arises also ceases and disappears. So this is the liberating insight. When you see this deeply with wisdom in your own experience, then there's no need anymore to identify with anything in particular. And there's no need anymore to push any arising experience away. We just continue to see with wisdom without getting caught up. And this naturally results in a life well lived and informed by wisdom, because we don't quite naturally, there's no desire to create suffering where it's not necessary. And with the intention of compassion, we can help relieve suffering where it does arise, where it's unnecessary. So someone's continuing asking about a teacher. The teacher will appear when you're ready. You know, you can, there's lots of teachers online. You can explore. Just do your practice to the best you can with some guidance. Find a good source of guidance. And, you know, if there's possibilities to do retreats, whether online or in person, with a teacher that you've connected with, then that's always a helpful way to deepen in the practice. But there's lots and lots of resources online, so many. So do explore that and to find your way. And as someone says here, the teacher will appear when you're ready. And that teacher is not necessarily someone who embodies a teacher role. There are so many teachers in our lives that appear and reveal something in all forms, as events or other beings or moments of experience. So I'm going to finish up soon. I'll just see what other one or two more questions. Very good. Could you share your thoughts on overcoming cynicism? Okay. So I am, I was going to say, if you know the E-type, Enneagram type system, I think I am a E-type 6. So I know cynicism very well, the loyal skeptic, and also being Australian born, we're somewhat natural cynics in many ways, for some reason, just our history, our characters. But cynicism, it can develop sometimes as a result of the crashing of our idealism. And this is very natural. You know, and many of us are idealistic in this world, in these times, but particularly spiritual practitioners, we can also have a lot of idealism, and that can lead us on in our path. But at some point, it will be challenged and perhaps crash. And also, cynicism can arise out of, you know, having our faith in something seriously challenged or crushed. But this is all part of our life's learning. So what happens, you know, cynicism develops, I think, when we allow, say, if we've lost faith in something or you know, our idealism has crashed in on itself due to various experiences. What we've got to be careful of, I mean, that is part and parcel of a spiritual journey. It doesn't mean you never find faith again or trust, let's say, or hope, for want of, not to find idealism again, but to understand the mechanics of idealism. You know, if we're attached to certain ideals, and we find we can never, you know, we hold ourselves to task so strongly, you know, to become an ideal. You're never going to become an ideal. You're never going to become a perfect something. Spiritual practitioners can get caught in this. It doesn't mean then that we just fall back into I'm a hopeless case. I'm never going to be able to do this. But what's important is we come, you bounce into that kind of negativity sometimes, and if you stay stuck there, that's where the cynicism can develop. Yeah, on this kind of negative perceptual basis. But actually, if you just recognize, well, that's the flip side of idealism, but it's important not to attach to that either, but just to see it's the other side. The other side of hope, if we're clinging to hope, can be fear or despair. So just recognize, there's that. But that's also a mind state, a mental condition. It's not who and what you are. So you see, and if you see cynicism arising as a cynical view, perhaps of the world, a cynical view of politicians, a cynical view of various things, you can understand how that has come about. Sometimes the longer we live, the more cynical we can get, because we've seen a lot in terms of the world of politics or the way human nature plays out. And it can leave, like a sense of hopelessness or a sense of bitterness. But if you look at those states themselves, they're conditioned states. They're kind of flip side, the opposites. And they're not really the nature of the heart. The nature of the heart is naturally loving. I talked about these states, Brahma Viharas. In some circles, we talk about them as these are the natural expressions of a free heart. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. Natural expressions of the heart, or the emotional life of a Buddha. These states arise in response to the conditions of beings or conditions of the world. So the free heart, these are natural states. So cynicism is not a natural state. Cynicism is a conditioned state, but it may have underneath it a sense of loss of trust or of hurt or loss of energy or faith. And so understanding that is helpful. It's a conditioned state. And typical conditioned views or cynical views, they can be quite humorous sometimes, kind of a cynical, dry humor. It kind of can point to certain things in existence, which can make us laugh, which is actually good because we're breaking, making it a bit light. But if it conditions a habitual cynical state, what's happening is the heart's getting more contracted. You don't want to get trapped there. And further along, it almost becomes embittered sometimes. So we really have to look into that state and how it's entrapping, and free the mind. You can free the mind in any moment. It doesn't necessarily take a long time. It takes just seeing clearly, this is a thought, this is a mind state. It's not the heart's true nature. It's not the mind's true nature. By recognizing awareness itself, it sees these states as conditioned, impermanent, not who and what we are. And then the heart's true qualities emerge. Like anything else, like any other mind state, cynicism can become a habit. The cynical mind state can become a habit. But if you see the dukkha of that, the dukkha of clinging to that, then it's not worth entertaining. And so the heart can just discard or abandon or let go of that every time it arises. It's not to deny it or ignore it or suppress it when it arises, but recognize, there is that. But it's not worth hanging on to. It's not worth cloaking your own light in that heavy dimness. So seeing the Buddha nature of all beings, the naturally free nature of awareness in the mind can help shed this habit. If it's connected with something or someone who has disappointed you in the past, it may need a little more unfolding if there's that resentment or hurt or lack of forgiveness. And sometimes it can be just getting too much information from this media circus on everything that's bad and wrong with the world, and the media just, is becoming a very deteriorating badly the level of media reporting in the world, to kind of the level of adolescent emotional reactivity and all this clickbait out there. It's just kind of creating and perpetuating states of desire and aversion. People don't recognize that these are such painful states to perpetuate and be caught in. So, we don't have to pay attention to that media circus. Just turn off, or pay attention to the good things that are happening in this world, the good stories where people are really working for out of compassion and really finding beautiful outcomes with supporting people and beings in this world. And this can really feed the heart that, in a way that restores faith in the goodness of humanity. So maybe that's a good place to bring this to a close, actually, bring this session to a close. Because it is easy in this world with the constant 24/7 media stream, if we're caught into that, to get fed a lot of negative information. It's not to ignore the bad things that are happening in this world, but to really recognize we're being spoon-fed it. And this can lead to deep despair and cynicism. So we've got to balance our diet, balance what we consume by way of information, and feed the heart on the goodness that is also there, that is also out there. Don't keep tuning in to the bad stuff. It's not worth it. It's, as I said, I've felt that the whole with social media, all the media streams of media have been so influenced by this field that the level of reporting has deteriorated terribly. Not just reporting, but regurgitating. So we don't have to expose ourselves to that. Recognize that that's a certain level of information and conditioning it's like eating bad food, toxic food all the time. It's not going to make you feel good. So you can still be aware of what's going on in the world without having to consume that constant negative diet. So be judicious, be discerning about what supports your mind and heart. It's not about ignoring or suppressing. It's just using wisdom of discernment. Now you know what's helpful and what's not helpful. So I hope those few words of encouragement help everyone. And lovely to tune in with you all. I'm just quickly scrolling through here. Okay. Thank you, everybody. And may you all go well, and a happy Lunar New Year. It's the year of the water rabbit. It's my year. I turned 60 this year. I'm a water rabbit. So may it go well for everyone. And, keep the faith is not about hope that things are going to get better. It's more about recognizing the goodness of who you already are and trusting in that. Trusting that if you wish to develop this heart mind and align yourself with goodness, that you can do it just through that intention. So I wish you all the very best. And Jayasara will be here 2 weeks from now to guide this session. And I'll see you in a month. So take good care of everyone. Bye for now.